Welcome to Lindamood-Bell Radio. I'm Dave Hungerford for Lindamood-Bell, and while much about this school year is uncertain, one thing's for sure. Months away from the classroom leads to learning loss in skills like reading and math. This is especially true for students who struggle with learning, and virtual learning can make a struggling child's school experience even harder. Lindamood-Bell is here to help. You can count on our experience and proven results to make a difference for your child. Our instruction for reading, comprehension, and math helps kids catch up or get ahead. Our programs are evidence-based. We work one-to-one, live, online, or in person by location. Get in touch to get started. LindamoodBell.com. This episode is a conversation I had with a student I met in our London Learning Centre. His name is Jack. Jack, you have been a student off and on at Lindamood-Bell for a long time. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Well, I've lived in London my whole life, and in 5th grade I moved into the American system, so I changed my education system. But before that, when I was in lower school, in the English system, I couldn't hear actually, because I had glue ear. And from that, no one actually knew that, and I didn't know that myself because I was really small. And because of that, I never actually learned how to read. So
was it like a total deafness? I mean, you couldn't hear parents, or
I couldn't
just kind of.
It was sort of. I don't really remember fully, but glue ear is when wax built up basically in your ear, and it sort of almost deafens your hearing. And no one really knew that. And at the age I was learning how to read, but then because I couldn't hear, I never actually fully learned how to read.
Probably couldn't hear the sounds very clearly.
Yeah, I couldn't, so I didn't know how to actually read or do any form of communication properly.
And so this is when you were like 5, 6, 7?
Yeah, exactly.
Young?
Lower school.
Lower school.
And when we found out that I couldn't read and I couldn't hear actually, we got my ears cleared out, but I still didn't know how to read, so I came to Lindamood-Bell, and they actually taught me how to read because I was quite far behind.
And so this was, you're 17 now, is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
17, so 10 years ago. Do you remember coming here?
Yeah, I actually do. I remember a few of my first times. It's kind of blurry, but...
Was it the same office that we're sitting in now?
That's right.
Yeah. We're here in Notting Hill. What do you remember from those early days?
Well, I was kind of small, so it's all sort of blurry, but I remember my first couple of times I was sort of nervous because I didn't really know this place, but everyone was super nice and everyone was super friendly. And the way that it sort of works is each hour you're here, you get a different tutor or a teacher, for example, and you work one-on-one with them. And that's actually really beneficial because I needed more support than other kids because I didn't know how to read. And with that one-on-one, you can actually go a lot slower, but then also get more of an in-depth education and teaching.
And so you said that you were in the British system of education early on. Do you remember them trying to teach you how to read?
Not really, no, but I remember I found it harder and I didn't know why, and that's because I couldn't hear. And but I didn't know that at the time, so everything was sort of blurry, but everything was a lot harder because I couldn't hear at all. But after I got my ears cleared and I started coming here and I started actually learning how to read, everything actually got a lot better.
And you said that at some point you switched from the English system to the American system.
In England, there are American system schools. They're an international school, but it's on the American curriculum. So kids whose families move around a lot, either the foreign service or just a lot of movement in their life, if they want to have a continuous education, they go into the international system, which means no matter which country you're in, you'll still get the same type of education because it's a global one, not just an English or just an American. It's sort of a mixture of everything. And my parents thought it would be best for me because I found the English system actually a lot harder, and I'm probably going to go to the States for university, so it would actually make a lot more sense for me to sort of get more of an American education, so I'm already sort of adapted to the American system, than be in the English system and completely transfer over.
Great. And is this your last year in high school?
Second to last, actually.
We would call it junior at home.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. because I couldn't hear, everything fell back behind. But because of Lindamood-Bell, they really helped me actually read and sort of get caught up. But because I couldn't hear and I fell back quite far, I was always behind everybody. So when I moved into the American system in 5th grade, so start of middle school, I stayed back 1 year. So I basically did 5th grade twice. And the English system to the international or American system, it actually didn't make much of a difference because they're both different years.
And do you have any emotional remembrances of that time? Was it was it really upsetting for you, or was it just kind of confusion?
It was sort of just confusion, and I didn't fully know what was happening. I remember one day I was just watching TV in my parents' room, and apparently they were saying, like, Jack, please pass me the remote, but I couldn't hear anything, and I was never aware of it. And then I look back on that, and that's kind of scary for a kid, I would say, because you can't really hear anything, and that means you can't communicate. So it was sort of this odd, scary time.
My kids would never pass the remote either, but there could be other safety concerns if you're crossing the street and say,
yes, that's
Jack,
true.
don't step, car's coming right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so, how are you've stayed with us and occasionally come back for some lessons here at Lindamood-Bell?
So when I was younger, I used to come here, I want to say almost every day, or at least 4 times a week probably, because I couldn't hear, and that was my main purpose of being here. But because I didn't know how to read, I came here a lot. But then once I got my reading to a certain level, caught up, because I spent so much time on the reading, my math went down quite a lot, and I've never really been the best at math, so they also helped me with math here. And now throughout the years, I've occasionally come in and out for a month period, 2-week periods. It just depended on what I needed help with, really. And we would either do math or reading.
And what does that look like now that you're a young man, basically? We all know the learning to read part. How about when you currently come in for a lesson? What do you kind of do during the hour?
Well, it's actually been quite stable throughout my whole life coming here. It's sort of the same procedure, but just more adapted because I'm older. So I come in, I sign in, I meet my teacher, we go into the room, and we just sort of work. And coming in now that I'm older, I wasn't really sure about it because I thought, oh, it's more for like younger kids, but they actually changed how they formatted their lessons to make it more adult-like, I want to say. And we would do more like adult texts. Like, for example, right now I'm actually reading Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, which is actually more adult than like a child's book, for example.
Sure. And
the way that they sort of structure the lessons is we still have breaks in between, but we sort of work first, and then we have a 5-minute break halfway between the lesson, and then we continue working right after that. And then I now just come in here for 1 hour, but beforehand I used to come in here for 3 hours, let's say, and every single hour you'd have a 5-minute break. And it's just a really good system, actually. It works quite well.
And is Frankenstein part of your school curriculum now?
Yeah, that's right.
So you're able to apply it to your school curriculum?
Yeah, exactly.
And why do you think the program itself, what's about it that's helpful?
I think it's that one-on-one mentorship, and you actually sort of get to know who you're working with, either teacher to child or child to teacher. It goes both ways. Mm-hmm. Like, you learn who the kid is, and then I learn who the teacher is. And when you're younger, you don't really make that sort of bond, I want to say, but now that I'm older, I actually know my teachers, and we can actually work a lot better. And because of the one-on-one, you don't get lost in the crowd, because sometimes at school I sort of get lost in the crowd and I sort of sit in the classroom not sure exactly what's happening because there's a lot of other kids there. But here, because you have that one-on-one mentorship, you always have attention, you always have someone to ask, oh, I don't really understand that, or can you repeat that, or can you help me with this, like, what's this word, for example. And that actually, it's a lot better because it's a lot slower, and You can actually learn a lot more that way than just sort of getting all this information told at you, and you somehow have to figure it out.
And I know that, I've been a tutor myself, and I know that they've talked to you about the making pictures
exactly
in your head of that word, and probably encourage you when you come across a word you don't know, okay, go look it up and then start to make pictures of that.
Yeah, exactly.
They call that imagery.
Yeah.
Why do you think that's helpful in developing, say, vocabulary or just understanding of things?
I think,
or maybe you don't think it's helpful.
I think it actually is really helpful because I'm actually a visual learner. I learn better by seeing things or imagining things, actually. And in life, I feel like they're teaching us not just in reading, like reading a book, for example, but they're teaching us sort of more generally in life. So if you come across a word that you don't really understand, you try to pair it with another word, for example, that you know, or try to get the context of the sentence. You try to build a picture of what it's actually saying. So you're not just using your vocabulary and not just the words, you're also adding images to it. And I think that actually helps in understanding language and understanding what words mean.
That's very well put. Because you can't just come across a word, and if you have no context for it,
exactly,
how would you ever know what it's going to mean?
Right.
So you've got to have something to be able to even apply that imagery to it. You are about to probably start applying for different universities.
That's right.
What's your plan?
I actually want to go into fine arts, and I also need to do like my thesis statements and everything. I haven't started that yet. It's still sort of the early process, but I think because my reading level now is actually sort of improved, I can actually use more precise vocabulary with how I describe things and sort of how I actually structure and how to present myself to universities. I think that's actually improved a lot here. And it's sort of the beginning of that stage now, which is kind of scary actually, because it's sort of almost a reality now. But I think I'm ready.
Great. And in fine arts, what's your specialty? Do you have?
I don't really have a specialty right now. I'm still sort of a general mixed media person, and I think when I go into university, I'm probably going to do a foundation course and then go into more in-depth courses. So.
Do you have a few picked out?
Universities. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about Canada and the States. I've started looking at both countries right now.
Nice.
And it's been good. Here they have these things called Facesheets. It's basically sort of like your schedule and sort of what you do during your lessons. And you sort of start, let's say for reading, there's this thing called the sight word list, and it's basically a list of words that you go down in order and you just read them out to see how fluent your reading is with different words, not in any sentence. So you just look at different words like car, door, truck, apple, food.
Probably real common ones.
Yeah, exactly. And then as the list goes down, they get more complex. I actually finished that list before, and with Facesheet, it sort of has exactly what it's your lesson plan. But because I finished the sight word list, for example, they adapted my Facesheet to set a new task. And they're always adapting and sort of remolding your lessons and your schedule depending on how well you're doing, or if you're not doing so well, how can they actually take a step back and make it so that they are helping you even more. And some kids go faster than others, and some kids go slower than others. And for no matter what, it's really interesting because I'll have one teacher, and we're reading Frankenstein, for example, which is a harder text. Then the next lesson, I'll see that same teacher teaching, let's say a small girl, how to read the alphabet, just like a really broad example. And it's really interesting how the teachers here can actually adapt their teaching style and how they actually teach kids through so many different ages.
Yeah, and the thing about sight words is that they're so important because they're the words that are very common.
Yeah.
Like would and could and though and through and of exactly. And things. Also, there are sometimes some of the hardest words to kind of get into your hard drive of memory to pull them up because while we have some rules in English on pronunciation, they don't always play fair as well. Exactly. It's like cough and enough and though, all have the same OUGH endings, but they don't say the same thing. So you just have to be able to look at it and pick it. So that's when you say it's a sight. It's your you need to know it on sight, so that when you're reading a sentence, you don't stumble and start to lose the context of the sentence. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's a good linguistic point. Maybe you should be a linguist in addition to fine arts.
Sure, sign me up.
We were joking in the lobby. You don't seem to have a British or a Canadian accent.
I actually don't. I have a mixed accent, I would say. Because I've lived here my whole life and I was in the English system, I did have a British accent, but I moved in the start of 5th grade, as I said, and at that time I had a British accent, but then it started forming into more of an American accent because in the international system there's a lot of American kids. So I've sort of picked up the British accent when I was younger and then the American accent when I was in middle school, and I've sort of combined them both almost. More American, obviously, but I also
maybe it's a global accent.
It's more of a global accent, and I actually use, when people say, no, that's the American way of saying that word, or that's the British way of saying that word, I sometimes don't actually know which was which anymore, because it's all jumbled up together.
What would you say was the biggest difference between the British, other than the curriculum, what were other differences between the British schooling and the American, if you remember?
I think the biggest differences are exams. When I was in the English system, we started doing our 10 plus, 11 plus, 12 plus. These are...
What do those mean?
They're basically tests that you do at these certain ages. At just these tests, and you spend hours preparing for them each day, and you sort of just start doing tests from a really young age. And I feel the English system is more based off of you memorize a bunch of facts, you put it on paper, and you hand it into the teacher, and you get marked on that. And that system just generally just doesn't work well for me. I'm not very, I don't just memorize things and put it on paper. I need to actually be learning by doing and experimenting and actually trying to figure out the answers to the problems. And that's not really the English system, and that's also another reason why I moved. But with the American system, or international, I should actually say, it's more trying to understand the problem and then how to mold your answer around the problem almost, and try to understand what it means, not just take information and put it on paper.
So kind of come up with you were talking about thesis, or kind of come up with an understanding of an issue and be able to articulate it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's a big change, I think, even in the American system from, say, high school to, or maybe early high school to mid-high school. I think, in my experience. And so, great. So anything else on your reading list besides Frankenstein?
I just finished Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale 2, the Testaments. That was really, really good. The Handmaid's Tale, the first book, that was just incredible, actually. I've never read a book like that because it was so in-depth and so true, because, as she said, nothing in that book hasn't already happened in our world. And that really stuck with me because the topics in it are very just absolutely quite scary, actually.
You think it's a dark dystopian view of the future, but
very dark.
And also the may present, not be the future.
Very, actually, probably the present, actually. Exactly. That's probably one of my favorite.
So what are the fun things that people do here in this part of the city?
Well, there's just so many good things about the city. There's, you can literally just go out into the street and see amazing street art everywhere. There are markets and little pop-up shops everywhere with different foods and different spices, and because the culture here is so diverse, because there's so many different types of people, you can literally find almost every single food here. I love food, and I love trying to try new food and trying to experiment with food and grow my palate. And I can literally just go out into London and go to this Indian restaurant, for example, and it'll be amazing. And then right next door there'll be a Chinese and then a Mexican place. And the combination of cultures and people in the city make it what it is. And I think that's one great thing about London. And then also the theatre district and just the old history versus the new history, what's happening now versus in the past. There's so much history, and if you look up in the streets, you'll see all these old buildings. You'll see this one really old building next to the super new building, and it gives such a good contrast to the city and actually built it into what it is, which is London.
There's some great museums downtown too.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
That's great. Well, I think you sound like you're well on your way to a good university career. So
I hope so.
I will thank you for sitting down and talking with me.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for listening. Visit our website, LindamoodBell.com, and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn. We are Lindamood-Bell.